Saipan, July 1944. The cave smelled of salt and blood and fear. 24 women pressed together in the darkness, their gray uniforms torn and stained, their faces hollow from weeks of starvation. Each held a small knife, standard issue for Japanese military personnel, meant for cutting field rations or trimming bandages. Today they served a different purpose. Yuki Tanaka's hands shook as she pressed the blade against her own throat. She was 24 years old. She had studied literature in Kyoto before the war. She had wanted to be a doctor, to heal, to save lives. But women could not be doctors in Imperial Japan. Women served. Women obeyed. And now women were expected to die rather than face the shame of capture. Her commander's final words still echoed in her mind, spoken 3 hours earlier, as the American tanks rumbled closer, as the artillery shells shook dirt from the cave ceiling. Death before dishonor. Never surrender to the barbarians. They will violate you. They will torture you. Better to die as loyal subjects of the divine emperor than live as playthings for demons. The commander had then placed his own pistol to his temple and pulled the trigger. The sound still rang in Yuki's ears. Beside her, Keiko sobbed quietly. 19 years old, a signals operator, she had already drawn the knife across her wrist. Blood ran down her arm in thin rivulets, black in the dim light. But the cut was shallow. Fear or hesitation or some stubborn animal instinct to survive had stayed her hand. "I cannot do it," Keiko whispered in Japanese. "I am sorry. I am a coward." Yuki looked at the knife against her own throat. She thought of her father, a history professor, who had taught her that knowledge was the highest form of loyalty. She thought of her mother, who had whispered to her the night before Yuki left for military service, "Come home. Whatever it takes, come home to me." Then she heard it, a voice from outside the cave, speaking Japanese. Not the harsh, guttural Japanese of their military commanders, but soft, tired, almost gentle. "Please come out. We have water. We have medicine. No one will hurt you." The voice was female. How could demons sound so tired? How could barbarians offer water? She made her decision in the space between heartbeats. She dropped the knife. The clatter of metal on stone seemed impossibly loud. "I choose life," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "even if it means shame." She grabbed Keiko's bleeding wrist and wrapped it with a strip torn from her own uniform. Then she took the younger woman's hand and began crawling toward the cave entrance, toward the light, toward the unknown. 22 other women followed. 2 stayed behind, choosing the emperor's final command over the uncertainty of mercy. This is the story of how 100 Japanese women discovered that the greatest weapon America wielded was not the atomic bomb that would soon devastate 2 cities. It was not the massive fleets that dominated the Pacific. It was something far simpler and far more devastating to everything these women believed. It was kindness, unexpected, undeserved, unstoppable kindness. And it would begin with a breakfast of bacon and eggs that would change everything. The sunlight blinded her after 3 days in the cave. Yuki stumbled forward, raising her hands above her head in surrender, waiting for the bullets. They never came. Instead, American soldiers rushed forward with canteens, with first aid kits, with voices conveying urgency rather than hatred. Hands, gentle hands, guided her to sit. Someone pressed a canteen to her lips. The water was clean cold, not poisoned. Just water. Through her blurred vision, she saw the woman who had called to them. An American officer in combat fatigues, her dark hair pulled back under a cap bearing the insignia of the Army Nurse Corps. She was Asian, Yuki realized with shock. The woman knelt beside Keiko, examining the wrist wound with practiced efficiency. "Superficial," she said in Japanese. "You will be fine. What is your name?" Keiko stared at her, unable to speak. "My name is Captain Sarah Chen." The woman continued, wrapping Keiko's wrist with clean white gauze. "I am a nurse. You are prisoners of war. You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention." "Do you understand?" "I understand," Yuki said quietly. Captain Chen turned to her. Their eyes met. "Can you help me with the others? You have medical training." Yuki nodded. She had been a medical orderly for 18 months. "Then help me save your friends." "Not prisoners, not enemies. Friends." Yuki stood on shaking legs and began to work. Before we continue with Yuki's journey across the Pacific to a prisoner of war camp in the heart of America, I want to ask you something. Many of you watching this served during this time, or you knew someone who did. Your father, your uncle, Your older brother. Men who came home with stories they told around kitchen tables or stories they kept locked inside until the day they died. Did any of them ever mention encountering Japanese prisoners? The stories from this era are fading fast. Every day we lose more voices from the greatest generation. We need to preserve what remains. Drop a comment below sharing any stories you remember about prisoners of war, about enemy soldiers, about the end of World War II. And if you want to see more untold stories from America's past, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get back to Yuki, because what happened next on that transport ship would test everything she thought she knew about honor and shame. Over the following weeks, the 22 survivors from Saipan were joined by 78 other Japanese women captured across the Pacific. Some had been nurses on hospital ships. Others had operated radio equipment on occupied islands. A few had worked in administrative offices, typing reports and filing papers. All had believed they would die before seeing an American prison camp. The USS Crescent City carried 100 Japanese women toward the California coast. 2 had died from infected wounds despite Captain Chen's efforts. 98 now faced the slow torture of uncertainty. Yuki lay on a narrow bunk in the ship's hold, listening to the engines throb and the hull creak. The bunks were stacked 3 high. Above her, a woman named Tomoko prayed constantly to the emperor. Below her, Keiko slept fitfully, whimpering in her dreams. The conditions contradicted everything Yuki had been taught. Clean blankets, 2 meals a day, access to showers, medical care when needed, guards who mostly ignored them. But it was Michiko Sato who dominated the prisoners' hierarchy. Michiko was 26 from a samurai family in Tokyo. She had been a senior radio operator, fluent in English, from her education at an exclusive girls' school. She was also the most rigid believer in imperial ideology Yuki had ever encountered. On the 3rd day at sea, Michiko organized a meeting in the hold. "We must resist," she said in Japanese, her voice low but forceful. "We surrendered our bodies, but we do not surrender our spirits. The emperor is divine. Japan cannot lose." 20 women gathered around her nodding. "We refuse their food. We refuse their medicine. We show them that Japanese spirit cannot be broken." "But we will die," another woman said quietly. "Then we die, as loyal subjects." Yuki did not join the meeting. She sat on her bunk watching, saying nothing. Part of her understood Michiko's need to hold on to something when everything else had been stripped away. But another part could not stop thinking about Captain Chen's tired eyes and gentle hands. If Americans were demons, why had they pulled her from that cave instead of throwing grenades into it? On the 5th night, Yuki helped the medical corpsmen inventory supplies. The Americans seemed perpetually short-handed, and when they discovered she had medical training, they began using her as an assistant. The corpsman on duty was a farm boy from Iowa named Tom Hayes. 28 years old, broad-shouldered, with hands that looked more suited to plowing fields than dressing wounds. He spoke almost no Japanese. She knew little English. They communicated through gestures. This night, as they finished counting morphine vials, Hayes pulled something from his pocket, a brown rectangle wrapped in paper. "Hershey's," Hayes made an exaggerated eating gesture, then smiled. He broke off a square and popped it into his mouth. Then he held the bar out to her. "Chocolate, for you." Yuki hesitated. Accepting gifts from the enemy felt wrong, but curiosity won. She had never tasted chocolate. She took a small square and placed it in her mouth. The taste exploded across her tongue. Sweet, but not like Japanese sweets, richer, creamier. The chocolate melted, coating her mouth with an indulgent smoothness she had never experienced. For a moment, she forgot she was a prisoner. She closed her eyes and let herself simply feel pleasure. When she opened them, Hayes was smiling at her. "Good?" he asked. "Good," she repeated in English. Hayes wrapped up the rest of the bar and handed it to her. "Keep it." That night, lying on her bunk, she broke off tiny pieces and let them melt on her tongue in the darkness. If Americans were demons, why did their food taste like kindness? Michiko saw her returning from the infirmary the next morning. Saw the chocolate stain at the corner of Yuki's mouth. "You have been eating their bribes." It was an accusation delivered in front of a dozen other prisoners. Yuki felt her face flush. "It was just chocolate. They are buying you, making you soft, making you forget who you are." "I have not forgotten who I am." "Have you not? I watched you yesterday, laughing with that American guard. While our brothers die fighting these people, while our cities burn, the women around them had gone silent. The war is over for us, Yuki said quietly. We are prisoners. The war is never over, not until Japan wins or we all die trying. And if Japan does not win, if the emperor has lied to us, the hold went utterly silent. Speaking such thoughts aloud was treason. Michiko's face went white, then red. For a moment, Yuki thought the older woman might strike her. Instead, Michiko drew herself up, her voice cold. You shame us all. From this moment, you are dead to me. You are an American dog. She turned and walked away. 20 women followed her to the far end of the hold, creating a physical barrier between the faithful and the fallen. Yuki stood alone, feeling the weight of their judgment, but she also felt something else. Relief. Keiko appeared at her elbow. I do not think you are a dog, she whispered. I think maybe you are just honest. Yuki squeezed her hand. San Francisco Bay, September 18th, 1944. The Golden Gate Bridge rose out of the morning fog like something from a dream. Yuki stood on deck watching the red towers grow closer and felt her understanding of the world shatter. The bridge was intact, perfect, gleaming. She had been taught that American cities were bombed, burning, starving from Japan's submarine campaign. But the city spreading before her was untouched. Whole. The docks bustled with activity. Ships unloaded cargo. Buildings stood tall against the hills, windows catching the sun. How could this be? Other women joined her at the rails, staring in equal disbelief. Japan's propaganda had painted America as weak, defeated, on the verge of collapse. Yet here was a city that looked like it had never known war at all. As they disembarked at Angel Island, Yuki watched American soldiers unload crate after crate of supplies. Mountains of material. She thought of Japan, where by 1944 even rice had become scarce. How did you fight an enemy that threw away more than you had to begin with? Captain Chen met them at the processing center. Welcome to the United States, she said in Japanese, her tone businesslike but not unkind. You will be processed here and then transported to a prisoner of war camp in Wisconsin. You will be given clothing, food, and medical care. You will be expected to follow camp rules. If you cooperate, your time here will be as comfortable as wartime conditions allow. One woman raised her hand hesitantly. Will we be executed? Chen's expression softened slightly. No, you are protected by international law. The Geneva Convention requires that we treat prisoners humanely. Another woman, will we be used for medical experiments? No, absolutely not. Will the men here violate us? Chen's jaw tightened. Any soldier who touches a prisoner inappropriately will face court-martial. I cannot promise that everyone will be kind to you. This is war, and many Americans have lost family to Japanese forces, but abuse is against regulations and will be punished. The train ride from California to Wisconsin took 4 days. 4 days of watching America roll past the windows. Farmland rich and vast. Small towns with white churches. Cities showing no sign of bombing. Forests thick with trees. Everything the propaganda had told them was revealed as lies, 1 mile at a time. When they arrived at Fort McCoy, exhausted and disoriented, they were met by the camp's medical officer. A woman, Major Elizabeth Hartley, 35 years old with steel-gray eyes and an air of absolute competence. 3 brass oak leaves gleamed on her collar. I am the chief medical officer for this facility, she said through an interpreter. My staff and I will conduct your initial health assessments. After processing, you will be assigned to barracks. Do you have questions? Yuki's hand went up almost involuntarily. You command men, the interpreter translated. Major Hartley's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Yes, I am a major in the United States Army Nurse Corps. The male doctors in this facility report to me on medical matters. Is that a problem? Yuki shook her head, but her mind reeled. In Japan, women could be nurses but never doctors, could assist but never command. The idea of a woman giving orders to men seemed to violate natural law. What kind of country allowed this? They were issued clean prison uniforms and wool blankets, assigned to barracks with wood-burning stoves and actual beds with mattresses. Keiko sat on her bed, tears running down her face. What is wrong? Yuki asked. I do not understand, Keiko whispered. They are supposed to be demons, but they give us beds. Why do they give us beds? From across the barracks came Machiko's voice leading her faithful in prayer. Divine Emperor, protect your servants in this land of devils. Give us strength to resist their bribes and remember our true purpose. Yuki listened and felt the distance between herself and Machiko growing wider with each word. The mess hall at Fort McCoy could hold 200 people at long wooden tables. The Japanese prisoners were assigned their own section, separated from American soldiers by an aisle, and the weight of mutual suspicion. For 3 days, Machiko's faction held firm. They refused all food drinking, only water staging their silent protest. Yuki watched them grow paler, weaker, more hollow-eyed. Yuki herself had been eating. Not much and guiltily, but eating, Keiko too. And gradually others began to break ranks. The smell of food was too powerful. The hunger too real. On the fourth morning, September 24th, 1944, the cook served breakfast. That was when Yuki encountered the bacon. She had smelled it cooking from the barracks, a rich aroma that drifted through the morning air and made her stomach clench with hunger. But nothing prepared her for seeing it on her tray. 6 strips, thick cut, perfectly crisp on the outside. The fat translucent and glistening. The meat a deep reddish brown, steam still rising. Beside it, scrambled eggs, butter melting into them, fluffy and yellow. Toast white bread like she had only seen in movies. Real butter. Milk in a glass, cold and white. An apple red and perfect. 2,400 calories. More food than she had seen on a single plate since before the war began. Yuki picked up a strip of bacon with her fingers. The heat of it burned slightly, but she did not care. She bit down. The taste was unlike anything in her experience. Salt and smoke and richness. The texture crispy and tender at once. Fat that melted on her tongue. Flavor that seemed to expand and fill her entire mouth. She closed her eyes. For a moment she was not a prisoner. Not Japanese, not at war. She was just a human being, eating food, feeling pleasure. When she opened her eyes, they were wet with tears. Across the table, Keiko was crying too, a piece of egg-filled toast halfway to her mouth. "It is so good," Keiko whispered, as if confessing a sin. "Why is it so good?" Yuki looked down the table. Other women were having the same experience. Even those who had been resisting were beginning to break. You could see it in their eyes as they watched the others eat. The war between ideology and hunger. At the far end of the Japanese section, Machiko sat with her plate untouched. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her face was pale, all drawn, determined. Around her, her faction was crumbling. Women were picking up their forks, tasting, breaking. Machiko's eyes met Yuki's across the mess hall. In that look was accusation, fury, and something else. Something that might have been desperation. Yuki looked away first. She picked up another piece of bacon and ate it slowly, savoring every molecule of flavor. Let Machiko judge. This bacon was real. This taste was true. And in a world that had revealed itself to be built on lies, Yuki was beginning to think that truth might matter more than loyalty. October slipped into November. The Wisconsin trees turned gold and red, then bare. First frost came, painting the barracks windows with ice crystals. The routine at Fort McCoy settled into predictable patterns. Morning roll call at 6, breakfast at 7, work assignments at 8. The women were put to tasks befitting their status as non-combatant prisoners, laundry, kitchen duty, cleaning, basic sewing repairs. But twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, something different happened. Education classes. Major Hartley had made the announcement in early October. The United States believes in the power of education and truth. You will attend classes to learn English, American civics, and accurate history. Attendance is mandatory. Those who refuse will lose recreation privileges. Machiko had stood immediately. We refuse to be brainwashed. Hartley's expression had not changed. Then you will remain in your barracks during recreation periods. The choice is yours. It was not really a choice. Recreation time, those precious 2 hours each afternoon, when the women could walk the compound or sit in the weak autumn sun, was the only relief from monotony. 30 women followed Machiko's boycott for the first week. By the second week, it was 20. By the third, only 12 remained. Yuki attended from the beginning. The classroom was a converted storage building with a wood stove and rows of desks. Their teacher was a Japanese-American woman named Ruth Yamamoto, a Nisei who had grown up in California before her family was sent to the internment camps. Good afternoon, Ruth said in Japanese on that first day. My name is Ruth Yamamoto. I was born in Sacramento. My parents came from Hiroshima. In 1942, my family was sent to an internment camp in Arizona because the government believed we might be disloyal, even though we were American citizens. I have never been to Japan, but because of my face, I was imprisoned in my own country. She paused, letting that sink in. I tell you this because I want you to understand something. America is not perfect. Americans can be cruel, fearful, unjust. But America is also a place where we can speak these truths aloud, where I can stand here and tell you that my government wronged my family and I will not be executed for saying it. That is the difference I want you to learn. The first lessons were simple English, greetings, common phrases, the alphabet, but woven through the language instruction was something else. Information, facts, history that contradicted what the women had been taught. In the third week, Ruth brought maps. This is the Pacific Theater of War, she said, spreading a large map across the front table. These red pins are Japanese-held territories as of December 1941 after Pearl Harbor. Now watch. She began moving the pins, removing them from islands, from territories, showing the slow, inexorable American advance across the Pacific, Guadalcanal, the Solomon Islands, the Gilbert Islands, the Marshall Islands, Saipan. Japan has been retreating for 2 years, Ruth said quietly. The tide turned at Midway in June 1942. Since then, every major engagement has been a Japanese defeat. Your military leaders know this, but they have not told your people the truth. The room was silent. Yuki stared at the map, watching the red pins disappear one by one. All lies. Why are you telling us this? One woman asked, her voice hostile. Ruth's expression was gentle. To free you. You cannot make real choices based on false information. The war is not going as you were told. You deserve to know the truth. The crisis came on a Tuesday evening in mid-November. Hanako Kimura was 18 years old, from Osaka, shy and quiet and homesick. She had been a file clerk, shuffling papers, typing reports. She had surrendered without attempting suicide, earning Michiko's particular scorn. During dinner, Hanako suddenly doubled over, gasping. Her face went white. She tried to stand, then collapsed. Yuki was at her side in seconds. She felt Hanako's abdomen. The right lower quadrant was rigid, burning hot. When she pressed and released, Hanako screamed. Appendicitis. Advanced. The appendix could rupture at any moment. Without surgery, Hanako would die. Get Major Hartley, Yuki shouted to the nearest guard. Emergency. Surgery needed now. Within minutes, Hartley arrived, took one look, and made her assessment. Acute appendicitis, probably 12 hours from rupture. We need to operate immediately. She looked at Yuki. Can you assist? Yes. Then come. But as they lifted Hanako onto a stretcher, Michiko stepped forward, blocking their path. Behind her stood her remaining faithful 11 women, forming a human wall. No, Michiko said. Hartley's eyes went cold. Excuse me? She will not have American surgery. You will use her for experiments. We know what doctors do to prisoners. The accusation hung in the air. Unit 731 was Japan's own medical experimentation program, conducting horrific tests on prisoners in Manchuria. The programs were classified, but rumors had circulated. Hartley's voice was steel. I follow the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. If I do not operate, this girl dies. If I operate, she has a 90% chance of survival. Those are the facts. Now move. No. She refuses treatment. Hartley looked past Michiko to Hanako, writhing on the stretcher. Is that true? Do you refuse? Hanako's eyes were wide with pain and terror. She looked at Michiko, looked at Hartley, looked at Yuki. I do not want to die. Then you will die with honor, Michiko said sharply. It's a laboratory animal. She is 18 years old, Yuki said, stepping between Michiko and the stretcher. She has her whole life ahead. Let her choose. She is Japanese. She serves the emperor. The emperor would not want her defiled by enemy hands. Something snapped inside Yuki. All the weeks of watching Michiko's rigidity, her refusal to see truth, her determination to drag everyone else into her death cult of obedience. The emperor is not divine, Yuki said, her voice loud enough to fill the barracks. The emperor is a man who sent us to die for lies, a man who is losing this war and has been lying about it for years. And if Hanako dies because you are too proud to admit you have been deceived, then her blood is on your hands, not the emperor's. The barracks went utterly silent. Women stared. Guards shifted nervously. Michiko's face went through transformations. Shock, rage, something that might have been pain. You dare speak treason. I speak truth, something you have forgotten how to recognize. Michiko raised her hand as if to strike. Yuki did not flinch. For a long moment they stood frozen. Then Hanako spoke, her voice weak but clear. Please, I want the surgery. I want to live. Michiko's hand dropped. She stepped back as if physically struck. Her faithful parted, confused, uncertain. In that moment of hesitation, Hartley and Yuki moved, lifting the stretcher, carrying Hanako toward the door. As they passed Michiko, Yuki heard her whisper, barely audible. Traitor. But Yuki did not look back. The operating room was small, clean, shockingly well-equipped. Hartley worked with calm efficiency, directing Yuki to prepare instruments, while an anesthesiologist administered ether to Hanako. Within minutes, the girl was unconscious, breathing steady and deep. Have you observed surgery before? Hartley asked as she scrubbed her hands. Once, a field amputation on Saipan, the patient died. This one will not. Watch and learn. Hartley made her incision with precise, confident strokes. Yuki handed her instruments, anticipating what was needed, falling into the rhythm of surgical assistance. Clamp, retractor, suture. The movements were a dance, and Yuki found herself lost in the beauty of it. The appendix was inflamed, swollen to twice its normal size moments from rupture. Hartley removed it, cleanly checked for contamination, found none, and began closing. You have good hands, Hartley said as she worked. Steady, quick. You said you wanted to be a doctor. In another life, Japan does not allow women to be surgeons. America does. Barely. I was the third woman accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School in 1928. The male students tried to drive me out, said women were too emotional for surgery, too weak to handle the stress. I graduated top of my class. She tied off a suture. They still whisper about me, still question whether I really deserve this rank. But I do the work, save the lives, and eventually even the skeptics have to admit reality. How did you bear it, the hatred? Hartley glanced up, her eyes meeting Yuki's over her surgical mask. I decided their hatred was their problem, not mine. My problem was the patient in front of me. Everything else was noise. She nodded toward Hanako. Like this girl. Michiko's hatred is Michiko's problem. Your problem is helping me save a life. Which problem feels more important? Yuki looked down at Hanako's peaceful face. This one, she said quietly. Then you are already thinking like a doctor. They worked in silence. Finally, Hartley tied the last suture and stepped back. Done, she will recover fully. She began stripping off her gloves. If you want to continue assisting me, I will teach you. Not just assisting. Real surgical technique, anatomy, procedure, as much as I can convey in whatever time we have. Yuki felt something unfold in her chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility. Why would you teach me I am your enemy? Hartley was quiet for a moment, washing her hands. My brother died at Normandy, German machine gun. He was 23. I do not hate all Germans for that. I hate war. I hate the men who start wars and the systems that make good people kill each other. But you are a 24-year-old woman who wanted to be a doctor and was told no because of your gender. I am a 35-year-old woman who wanted to be a surgeon and was told no because of my gender. We have more in common than we have dividing us. She dried her hands and turned to face Yuki directly. The war will end eventually. When it does, Japan will need doctors. Good doctors. Doctors who learn modern technique, who understand that medicine is about saving lives, not serving empires. Maybe you can be one of those doctors. Maybe that is how we turn enemies into allies. One skill, one student, one life saved at a time. Yuki bowed deeply. I would be honored to learn from you. Then report to the hospital tomorrow at 0800. We have work to do. That night, after lights out, Yuki heard movement in the darkness. Someone approaching her bunk. Yuki, please, I need to talk. It was Michiko. They slipped out of the barracks into the November cold. Michiko walked to the far corner of the exercise yard. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. My father wrote to me. The letter came today. Yuki waited. He is dead now. The letter was written in July. Osaka was firebombed in August. My cousin wrote to tell me. Father died. Mother died. The house is gone. Everything is gone. I am sorry. Do not be, not yet. Let me finish. Michiko's hands were shaking. In his letter, my father told me things. He served in China, in Nanking. He was there in 1937. Yuki's breath caught. Nanking. Even in Japan, whispers of Nanking had circulated. Atrocities. Massacres. He described what they did, not in detail, just enough to make me understand. He said he had served the emperor with honor, but in that letter I could read what he did not write. The guilt, the shame, the knowledge that what they called honor was actually hell. Michiko turned to face Yuki, tears on her face, freezing in the cold air. If my father, who I loved, who I respected, if he could do terrible things in the emperor's name and call it honor, then what is honor? If the emperor commanded evil and we obeyed, what does that make us? And if everything I believe was a lie, then who am I? I do not know, Yuki said honestly. I am trying to figure that out myself. When you stood up to me, when you said the emperor was just a man I wanted to kill you. But you were right, and I have spent 3 weeks trying to accept that, and I cannot. Because if you are right, then everything I have done, everything I have been, was for nothing. Not nothing. You were loyal, you believed, you served what you thought was right. I was blind. I was stupid. I was a tool for evil men. You were lied to. We all were. Michiko wiped at her tears. How do you bear it? Yuki thought about Hanako's surgery, about Hartley's patient teaching. I bear it by doing something real, something true. I assist in surgery. I save lives. I learn skills that cannot be taken from me by propaganda or emperors. I find truth in work, not in belief. Is that enough? It has to be. What else is there? They stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Michiko spoke again, her voice steadier. Will you teach me what Major Hartley teaches you? I do not want to be useless anymore. I want to do something real. Yuki felt something loosen in her chest. Yes, I will teach you. And if the others call me a traitor, let them. Their hatred is their problem. Your problem is the patient in front of you. Everything else is noise. Michiko managed a small, broken smile. You sound like Major Hartley. I am learning from the best. Let me pause here because I want to ask you something that has been on my mind as I researched this story. These women had to confront the fact that everything they believed about their country, their emperor, their purpose turned out to be lies. That is a profound trauma, a shattering of identity. Many of you watching lived through times when the official story turned out to be more complicated than you were first told. The Gulf of Tonkin, weapons of mass destruction, the Pentagon Papers, moments when the narrative shifted and you had to reassess what you thought you knew. How did you handle it when you discovered that something you had been told by authorities turned out to be false? How did you respond? Did you dig in deeper like Michiko initially did, or did you start questioning everything? Like Yuki, drop a comment sharing your experience. This is not about politics. This is about that universal human moment when reality contradicts belief and you have to decide which one to trust. And if you are finding value in this story, hit that subscribe button. We are building a community here of people who care about the complicated truth, not the simple lie. All right, let us get back to Fort McCoy, because December is coming, and with it, the hardest test these women would face. December arrived with snow and ice and a cold that penetrated to the bone. The women had been issued winter coats, thick wool affairs that smelled of mothballs. They were warm. That was all that mattered. But as December 7th approached, the atmosphere changed. The guards grew tense. Some soldiers who had been friendly now looked at the prisoners with barely concealed hatred. 3 years. It had been 3 years since Pearl Harbor. 3 years since 2,400 Americans died in a surprise attack on a Sunday morning. For many Americans, that day remained an open wound, and the Japanese women at Fort McCoy carried the weight of collective guilt in American eyes. Tom Hayes explained it to Yuki one afternoon as she helped him inventory medical supplies. December 7th, hard day for Americans. he said carefully in his improving Japanese. Many soldiers here, they lose brothers, friends at Pearl Harbor. They look at you, they see enemy who killed people they love. Logic say you personally did not attack, but heart does not care about logic. We understand, Yuki said quietly. Many of us lost family too, to American bombs, to this war. Grief is grief, no matter which side. Hayes nodded. Some guards, they want to make you suffer on December 7th. Nothing official, just small cruelties. You should be careful. Stay quiet. Do not give anyone excuse. We will try. On the morning of December 7th, 1944, the prisoners were roused an hour early for roll call. The temperature was 5 degrees. The wind cut like knives. They stood in formation for 45 minutes while guards counted and recounted. Breakfast was reduced, half portions, watery eggs, 2 strips of bacon instead of 6, bread that was stale. Machiko, who had been softening over the past weeks, stiffened again. The old rigidity returned. They punish us for Pearl Harbor, she said quietly, as if we personally flew the planes. They are angry, Yuki replied. Let them be angry. It will pass. But it did not pass. The incident happened in the afternoon. Yuki had been assigned to laundry. But today the regular supervisor was absent, replaced by a young corporal named Jack Morrison. Morrison was 22 years old from Kansas. His older brother Tommy had died on the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor. He said, pointing at Yuki, come here. He held up a white sheet. This has a stain. Rewash it. Yuki examined the sheet. It was perfectly clean, but she nodded, took it, and returned to the washing tubs. 5 minutes later, Morrison returned. Still has a stain. Do it again. This happened 4 more times. The other women working laundry fell silent, watching. This was not about clean sheets. This was about power, about making a Japanese woman repeat a pointless task, about asserting dominance. On the 7th rejection, Yuki's patience snapped. The sheet is clean, she said in English. There is no stain. Morrison stepped close, his face inches from hers. Are you arguing with me, prisoner? I am stating fact. You do not state anything. You obey. Just like your people should have obeyed international law instead of attacking us without declaring war. I was not at Pearl Harbor. You are Japanese. That is enough. He grabbed the sheet and threw it on the floor into the dirt and slush. Now it really is dirty. Wash it again. Yuki stared at the sheet, stared at Morrison. Every instinct told her to pick it up, to obey, to avoid escalation. But something in her refused. No, she said quietly. Morrison's face went red. What did you say? I said no, I will not wash a sheet you deliberately soiled to humiliate me. That is not work. That is cruelty, and I will not participate in my own degradation. For a moment she thought he might hit her. His fists clenched, his body tensed. Then another voice cut through the tension. Corporal Morrison, what is the problem here? Tom Hayes stood in the doorway, his expression neutral, but his eyes hard. Morrison straightened. This prisoner is refusing a direct order, Sergeant. What order? To wash this sheet. Hayes walked over and picked up the sheet from the floor, examined it, looked at Morrison. This sheet was clean before you threw it on the ground. I can see the boot print, your boot print. So the question is, Corporal, why are you ordering a prisoner to rewash a clean sheet that you yourself deliberately dirtied? Morrison's jaw worked. It is December 7th, Sergeant. And you are American. Does that mean you personally bombed Hiroshima when it happens? Collective guilt works both ways, Morrison. Or it works no ways. Which do you prefer? Silence. Hayes's voice softened slightly. I know what today is. I know you lost your brother. Tommy was a good man and his death was a tragedy. But making this woman wash a clean sheet 30 times does not bring Tommy back. It just makes you into something Tommy would be ashamed of. Morrison's face crumpled. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Hayes handed the dirty sheet to Yuki. Wash this one more time. For real this time. Then you are done for the day. Thank you, Yuki said. Hayes shook his head. Do not thank me for basic decency. That should be the standard, not the exception. He paused. But you standing up to him, that took courage. January 1945 brought the coldest winter Wisconsin had seen in 20 years. Temperatures plunged to 15 below zero. The wind howled across the flat landscape. The wood stoves burned day and night, but still the women woke to ice crystals on windows, frost on blankets. Paradoxically, the brutal winter brought unexpected grace. The camp authorities increased rations, hot soup at lunch, extra bread, an additional blanket per woman. Access to the rec hall for 2 hours each evening, where a potbelly stove kept the space warm. It was in the rec hall that transformation continued. Someone donated a radio, old crackling but functional. The guards allowed it to be played in the evenings tuned to American stations. The prisoners heard swing music for the first time. Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller, the Andrews Sisters. The music was strange, syncopated, nothing like traditional Japanese melodies. But it was infectious. Yuki caught herself tapping her foot. Even Machiko allowed herself a small smile when certain songs played. Ruth Yamamoto brought books to the rec hall. English novels simplified for learners. Little Women, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Stories about American life, on American values, American dreams. Why does Jo March want to be a writer? One woman asked. Why does she not simply marry? Ruth smiled. Because in America, women can have ambitions beyond marriage. Not easily, not without struggle, but it is possible. Jo March chooses her own path. The concept was revolutionary. In Japan, a woman's path was predetermined, daughter, wife, mother. But here was a famous American story celebrating a woman who refused the script entirely. Yuki read Little Women 3 times that January. Each time she felt her understanding of what was possible expand. The Red Cross mail delivery came on a gray afternoon in late February, 9 months since capture. 9 months since most women had heard anything from Japan. Tanaka Yuki. Yuki's hands shook as she took the envelope, her mother's handwriting. She waited until evening until she was alone in a quiet corner of the rec hall before opening it. The letter was dated December 19. My dearest Yuki, if you receive this, you are alive. I thank the gods for your survival. The Red Cross confirmed you are a prisoner in America, that you are safe. That is enough. I must tell you difficult news. Your father did not survive the bombing of Tokyo on March 10th. The fires were like nothing anyone had seen. He was helping people evacuate when a building collapsed. They found his body 3 days later. He was a good man, Yuki. He believed in knowledge and truth, in the power of education. He would be proud that you are alive. He would tell you to learn to survive, to see the world as it really is. I am living with your aunt now in the countryside. We have little, but we have enough. Do not worry for me. The war will end soon. Everyone knows this, though no one says it aloud. When it ends, Japan will be broken, changed. We will need strong women to rebuild. Women who understand the new world. If you can stay in America and learn, stay. Do not rush back to ruins and starvation. Your duty now is not to the emperor or to some idea of homeland. Your duty is to survive and become someone who can help heal what is broken. Live, my daughter. Choose life. That is all I ask. Your loving mother. Yuki read the letter 3 times before the tears came. Her father, dead, killed not by soldiers but by fire. She thought of him as she had last seen him. Gray-haired, gentle, surrounded by books. He had whispered to her before she left. Question everything, even me, especially me. That is how you honor truth. He had died trying to save others. That was the legacy he left. And her mother, practical as always, giving her permission to let go, to stay in America if that was the path to survival, to choose life over loyalty to a nation that had proven itself willing to sacrifice its own people. Yuki folded the letter carefully and placed it in her pocket close to her heart. Then she went to find Machiko. She found Machiko in the barracks staring at her own letter. Your family, Yuki asked quietly. Machiko nodded. My parents. Osaka firebombing. March 13th. Both dead. The house destroyed. Everything gone. Her voice was flat empty. My cousin survived. He is trying to start an orphanage. So many children with no parents. He asks if I will help when I return. Will you return? I do not know. What is there to return to? Machiko looked up, her eyes dry but haunted. Your family. My father is dead. My mother tells me to stay here if I can. Says Japan will need people who understand the new world. Yuki sat beside Machiko. We are both orphans now. Our old lives are gone. The question is what we do with the new ones. They sat in silence. Around them, other women were reading their own letters, processing their own losses. The war had reached into every family and taken something. Someone. Finally, Machiko spoke. Do you hate them, the Americans, for killing your father? Yuki thought carefully. I hate the war. I hate the decisions that made the war necessary. I hate the systems that send young men to die and old men to burn and women to grieve. But Major Hartley did not bomb Tokyo. Tom Hayes did not kill my father. They are trying to be better than the war requires them to be. That has to count for something. My father participated in atrocities in China. I know that now. American bombs killed him. Is that justice or just more senseless death? Maybe it is just death. Maybe there is no justice in war, only survival and loss. Yuki pulled out her mother's letter. But my mother says we have a duty to survive, to become people who can help heal what is broken. I think she is right. Michiko was quiet. Then she said something that surprised Yuki. Major Hartley asked me to assist in the hospital. She says I have good organizational skills, that I could help manage supplies, coordinate schedules. She is teaching me basic nursing care. Will you do it? I think I must. What else is there? I can sit here and hate the Americans for winning a war Japan started. I can cling to an emperor who was never divine. Or I can learn something useful. Become someone who can help those orphans my cousin is trying to save. She looked at Yuki. You chose to learn. I thought you were a traitor. Now I think you were just wise before I was. Not wise, just scared and tired of lies. That is wisdom in disguise. They sat together as evening fell, two women who had been enemies then rivals, now something like friends. March brought thaw. The ice retreated, mud appeared, but with the mud came birds, green shoots, the promise of warmth returning. And with spring came news from the Pacific. Iwo Jima had fallen. Then Okinawa. American forces were now within striking distance of the Japanese mainland. The radio broadcast spoke of plans for invasion, of terrible casualties expected of Japan's refusal to surrender. In the rec hall, the prisoners listened with complicated emotions. Their country was losing badly. Cities were being bombed into oblivion. The military was sacrificing young men in suicide attacks. And yet the Japanese government would not surrender. Why do they not stop? Keiko asked one evening. Why do they keep fighting when they cannot win? Because surrender is shame, Michiko said quietly, and shame is worse than death. That is what we were taught. The emperor cannot admit error, so they will fight until every city burns, because that is preferable to saying we were wrong. That is insane, Yuki said. Yes, but it is our insanity. The insanity we all shared until we ended up here and saw an alternative. Yuki thought about the knife in the cave, about how close she had come to dying for a concept that had turned out to be hollow. August 6, 1945. All prisoners were to report to the rec hall immediately. Mandatory assembly. The tone in guards' voices suggested something unprecedented had happened. Major Hartley stood at the front, her face grave. Ruth Yamamoto waited to translate. Yesterday, August 6th, the United States dropped a new type of bomb on the city of Hiroshima. A single bomb, one bomb. The entire city has been destroyed. Casualties are estimated at over 70,000 dead, with more dying from radiation effects. The room erupted, women crying out, some in disbelief, some in horror. Hiroshima, gone. From one bomb. Hartley raised her hand for silence. I know this is difficult to comprehend. The bomb harnesses the power of the atom. It is unlike any weapon that has existed before. We are showing you photographic reconnaissance so you understand this is not propaganda. She unrolled large photographs. The images showed a city that no longer existed, flattened, vaporized. In the center, there was simply nothing. Buildings, streets, people all erased. Further out, ruins, shadows burned into walls where human beings had been standing when the flash came. Yuki stared and felt reality tilt. One bomb, the scale of destruction, was beyond comprehension. Beside her, Michiko was weeping silently. My cousin, he said he might go to Hiroshima. Please gods, let him have stayed in Osaka. Well, Hartley spoke again. The United States government has issued an ultimatum to Japan. Surrender immediately or face further attacks with this weapon. I hope your government chooses surrender. I hope this ends now. She left the photographs on display and withdrew. Yuki could not look away from the images. She saw the shadow of a person burned into concrete steps. Just a shadow. The person had been vaporized, leaving only their silhouette. What kind of weapon could do this? August 9th. Another assembly. Another bomb. Nagasaki. 40,000 more dead in an instant. August 15th. Noon Japan time. Evening in Wisconsin. The prisoners gathered around the radio. They had been told the emperor himself would address the nation. The emperor, speaking directly to the people. This had never happened before. The broadcast crackled through static. The voice was high-pitched formal speaking in archaic court Japanese. The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. Not necessarily to Japan's advantage. A euphemism so absurd it would have been funny if it were not tragic. Millions dead, cities destroyed, and the emperor described it as not necessarily to Japan's advantage. We have resolved to pave the way for a grand peace by enduring the unendurable and suffering what is unsufferable. Surrender. He was announcing surrender without saying the word. The war was over. Japan had lost. The rec hall was utterly silent. Then slowly women began to react. Some cried, some sat in stunned silence. Some of Michiko's old hardliner faction tore at their clothes wailing. The divine emperor had revealed himself to be mortal. The undefeatable empire had been defeated. Yuki felt strangely calm. She had stopped believing months ago. This was simply confirmation. She looked at Michiko. The older woman sat very still, tears running down her face. Finally, she whispered, barely audible. He was never a god. It was all a lie. My father died for a lie. Everyone died for a lie. Yuki took her hand. Yes, but we did not. We survived the lie, and now we can choose what comes next. What comes next? I do not know, but it is ours to choose. That is something. Around them, the initial grief and shock began to transform into something else. Relief. The war was over. They would not die in this camp. They would survive. And with survival came questions. What now? September 1945. The war was over. Japan had signed surrender documents aboard the USS Missouri. American forces were occupying Japan. The world was reordering itself. And in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, 98 Japanese women faced a decision. Major Hartley made the announcement in the rec hall on a cool September evening. The U.S. government is offering a repatriation program. Any prisoner who wishes to return to Japan may do so. Transport ships will begin departing in October. You will be returned to your families or to wherever you choose to go in Japan. She paused. However, there is another option. The government is also offering a limited immigration program for prisoners of war who have demonstrated valuable skills and cooperation during their captivity. If you have worked in the hospital, taught classes, or assisted in camp operations, you may apply for permission to remain in the United States. Eventually, after meeting certain requirements, you could apply for citizenship. The room erupted in whispers. Stay in America, become American. This is not a decision to make lightly, Hartley continued. Staying means starting over in a country that recently considered you an enemy. It means facing prejudice, discrimination, hardship. It means leaving behind everything you knew. But for some of you, it might also mean opportunity. The choice is yours. That night, the barracks buzzed with debate. Most women chose immediately. They would return to Japan. It was home, however, damaged. But some hesitated. Yuki lay in her bunk thinking. Return to Japan meant returning to a country in ruins, a country occupied by foreign troops, a country where women still could not be doctors. Stay in America meant medical school, possibly. Major Hartley had already spoken to her about sponsorship, about programs for war refugees. It meant learning a new language fluently. It meant facing hostility. It meant being forever foreign. But it also meant freedom. The freedom to choose her own path, to become a doctor, to live in a country where questioning authority was permitted, where women could vote, own property, make their own decisions. Across the barracks, Michiko sat writing a letter to her cousin. He had survived both atomic bombs by chance, by being in the right place at the right time. His orphanage now housed 60 children. He needed help desperately. The next morning, they compared decisions. I am staying, Yuki said. I am going to become a doctor. Major Hartley says there is a nursing school in California that will accept me. After that medical school, it will take years, but it is possible here. It is not possible in Japan. Michiko nodded slowly. I am returning. Those children need someone who understands what they have lost. Someone who can teach them to think, to question, to build something better than what we had. I cannot do that from America. Different paths, but the same goal, healing what is broken. Michiko managed a small smile. You will heal bodies. I will try to heal minds. Both are necessary. Will we see each other again? I hope so. When Japan rebuilds, when the world is sane again, when we are old women and can laugh about the young fools we were. Michiko pulled out paper and a pen. We should write regular letters, tell each other about our new lives, keep the connection. Yes, I would like that. They shook hands formally, then broke tradition and hugged. Two women who had started as strangers become enemies, transformed into rivals, and ended as something like sisters. October 15th, 1945, the day of separation. 63 women boarded trucks bound for the West Coast, where ships waited to take them home to Japan. 35 women stayed behind, beginning the long process of becoming something new. Yuki stood with the group, staying watching as Michiko and the others prepared to leave. Michiko had packed her few possessions, letters, a Japanese-English dictionary, photographs, a small notebook where she had written down everything she had learned about nursing care. Do not forget to write, Michiko said. I will not forget, you either. Take care of Keiko. She is staying too. Yes, Yuki nodded. Keiko had chosen to remain, had applied to work as a translator for the occupation forces. I will. Take care of those children. I will try. Michiko paused. Thank you, Yuki, for standing up to me when I needed it, for showing me that honor is not obedience. I would have died holding on to lies if not for you. You would have figured it out eventually. You are too smart not to. Perhaps, but you made it easier. Michiko bowed deeply. May you achieve your dreams, Dr. Tanaka. Not yet a doctor. But you will be, I am certain of it. They embraced one final time. Then Michiko boarded the truck, joining the others, heading back to an uncertain future in a devastated homeland. Yuki watched until the trucks disappeared from view. Beside her, Keiko was crying quietly. It feels wrong, Keiko said, staying here while they return home. Home is not always where you are born, Yuki replied. Sometimes it is where you are allowed to become who you really are. Major Hartley approached. Are you ready, Yuki? We have a lot of work to do. Nursing school applications, immigration paperwork, sponsor arrangements. I am ready. Good, because this will not be easy. You will face prejudice. You will be lonely. People will question your loyalty, your right to be here. It will take every bit of strength you have. I dropped a knife in a cave and chose life over honor. If I could do that, I can do this. Hartley smiled. Then let us begin. The years passed like pages turning in a book. Each one brought new challenges, new revelations, new transformations. Yuki moved to Iowa to the Hayes family farm. Tom's mother, Martha, taught her to bake apple pie, to can vegetables, to speak English without an accent. The community was suspicious at first. A Japanese woman living with an American family so soon after the war. But gradually, through church potlucks and harvest festivals, through small acts of kindness and stubborn persistence, acceptance came. She enrolled at the University of Iowa nursing program. The only Asian student, a professor suggested she stick to traditional healing. She studied 12 hours daily and graduated top 10% of her class. She met Sergeant Daniel Nakamura at a veterans function in San Francisco. He was Nisei, a member of the famous 442nd Regiment, the most decorated unit in American military history. His parents had been imprisoned at Manzanar while he fought for the country that had locked them up. They understood each other instantly, both betrayed by countries they had served, both choosing to believe in better versions of those countries. They married in 1951. Small ceremony. Tom Hayes attended as best man. Major Hartley, retired, now came from Baltimore. Daniel's parents, released from internment, attended. Initially cold, they warmed when they saw how Yuki looked at their son. And then came July 4th, 1952, the citizenship ceremony. San Francisco courthouse. Yuki stood with 47 other Japanese immigrants. The McCarran-Walter Act passed that year finally allowed Japanese to naturalize. For the first time since 1924, people who looked like her could become Americans. She wore a simple blue dress with a cherry blossom pin. Daniel stood beside her holding their one-year-old daughter, Elizabeth Harmony. They had named her Ari for short. Elizabeth after Major Hartley. Harmony for what they hoped to build. The judge asked the question. Do you absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate state, or sovereignty, and particularly to the Emperor of Japan? Yuki's internal voice answered before her mouth did. Renounce the Emperor. 7 years ago I would have died rather than say these words. But Emperor Hirohito is not divine. He is a man who led my country into ruin. I do not renounce Japan, I renounce the lie. Do you swear to support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic? This country bombed my father, imprisoned Daniel's parents. It is not perfect, but it gave me Hartley Hayes Martha Medical School, a daughter who will never be told she cannot be a doctor because she is female. I swear to the America that tries to be better. I do, she said aloud. The judge handed her the certificate. Yuki Nakamura, American citizen. Welcome home. Welcome home, Yuki cried. Daniel held her. Ari reached for the small American flag they had been given. In the audience, Tom Hayes gave a thumbs up. Major Hartley dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Welcome home. The letters between Yuki and Machiko continued for decades. 200 letters exchanged over 40 years, documenting parallel lives. Machiko wrote of the orphanage, of teaching children to question authority, to think critically, to build something better than what had been. She married Robert Chen, the American chaplain, in 1950, a Chinese-American man and a Japanese woman. Their parents would have been horrified. They did not care. By the 1960s, Sakura Academy had graduated 500 students. Some became doctors, some became engineers. One became the first female member of the Japanese parliament. Yuki wrote of medical school, of becoming a surgical nurse, later a nursing instructor. Of Ari growing up bilingual, bicultural, belonging fully to both worlds. Of the clinic she opened in San Francisco's Japantown in 1960, serving immigrant communities. Both women were building bridges, healing what had been broken, proving that enemies could become something else if given enough time, enough truth, enough willingness to change. August 15th, 1985. 40 years after the Emperor's surrender broadcast. Fort McCoy had organized a reunion. Former prisoners, former guards, families. Anyone connected to that strange chapter of history when 100 Japanese women had discovered that their enemies were human. 34 former prisoners attended. Yuki flew from California with Daniel and Ari, now 34 herself, and a surgeon at Stanford. Machiko flew from Japan, her first return to America in 40 years. They saw each other across the airport terminal at Milwaukee. Gray hair, laugh lines, life experience etched into their faces. But the recognition was instant. They embraced without words, both crying, both laughing. You look so American, Machiko said finally. You look so free, Yuki replied. They laughed harder. At Fort McCoy, now partly museum, partly active base, the ceremony was simple but profound. A memorial plaque was unveiled. In memory of the Japanese Women POWs of Fort McCoy, 1944 to 1946. Former enemies, lasting friends. Major Hartley, now 75 and in a wheelchair but still sharp, spoke first. 40 years ago, I met 98 young women who had been taught to fear us. My job was to show them they were wrong. Some of you chose to stay in America. Others chose to rebuild Japan. Both choices took courage. Both honored what we tried to teach, that people can choose their own path. Tom Hayes, 69, now spoke next. I gave Yuki a chocolate bar in 1944. Wasn't supposed to. Could have been disciplined, but I thought she's a kid like my sister. She's scared. Small kindness costs nothing. He smiled. Yuki became a nurse, taught hundreds of students, saved countless lives. That chocolate bar, best unauthorized decision I ever made. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Then Yuki spoke. In July 1944, I sat in a cave in Saipan with a knife to my throat. I had been taught Americans were demons. I chose to live, thinking I chose shame. But what I found here was not demons. I found Sergeant Hayes, who saw me as a person. Major Hartley, who saw me as a future colleague. Not perfect people. America is not perfect. But people who chose kindness when hate would have been easier. Her voice wavered slightly. My father died in Tokyo, killed by American bombs. My husband's parents were imprisoned in Manzanar. We carry these wounds, we do not forget them. But we also carry the memory of bacon that tasted like hope. Clean water when we expected poison. Medical care when we expected death. And 40 years of letters between former enemies who became sisters. She gestured to Ari in the audience. My daughter is a doctor like I dreamed to be. She treats patients of all backgrounds because I taught her what I learned here. See the person, not the enemy. That is America's gift to me. Not bacon, not chocolate. The idea that people can change. Thank you for that gift. Standing ovation. Many crying. Michiko spoke last. I was the angry one, the true believer. I called Yuki a traitor for eating your food. I clung to the lie of the emperor's divinity because without it I was nothing. Then I watched footage of Nanking, read letters from my dead parents, heard the emperor's mortal voice admitting defeat, and I shattered. She paused. But in isolation, Cell Sergeant Hayes brought me food anyway. Said, you're still human. Humans need to eat. Such a simple thing, but it saved me. I went back to Japan broken, but I built a school from ruins. Taught 500 children to question, to think, to choose their own path. That school exists because you showed me that strength is not rigidity, it is bending without breaking. Thank you for not treating us as we deserved. Thank you for treating us as we could become. More tears, guards and POWs hugging. The final call to action came not from the narrator, but from Ari Nakamura, Yuki's daughter, speaking to the camera crew filming a PBS documentary about the reunion. My mother was your enemy. She served an empire that committed atrocities. She believed lies. But some of you chose mercy over revenge. That mercy gave me life. My children's lives. My grandchildren's lives. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Today, who are we calling enemy? What lies do we believe about them, and who among us will choose mercy when hate feels easier? That is my mother's gift, the question that never stops mattering. The documentary ended with footage of a cherry blossom tree planted at Fort McCoy in 1985. 4 generations sitting under it, Yuki Ari's children, blossoms falling like snow. Yuki's voiceover recorded shortly before her death in 2002 at age 82. In Japan, cherry blossoms are beautiful because they fall. Nothing lasts, not empires, not wars, not even hate. What remains is what we choose to build from the ruins. 100 Japanese women stepped off that ship in 1945 expecting death. Some found it. Others found something harder life with all its messy, contradictory, painful, beautiful complexity. May we all inherit that courage. To question our own lies. To see the person inside the enemy. To choose kindness when hate feels easier. That is the gift America gave me. I spent 50 years trying to pay it forward. Will you? Screen fades to black. Text appears. Yuki Nakamura passed away in 2002 at age 82. She trained over 300 nurses in her career. Michiko Chen passed away in 2005 at age 85. Her school graduated over 2,000 students. Major Elizabeth Hartley passed away in 1997 at age 87. Sergeant Tom Hayes passed away in 2010 at age 94. His family still farms in Iowa. The letters between Yuki and Michiko are preserved at the Smithsonian Institution. May their story remind us mercy is a choice, and choosing it changes everything.